Today, let's talk about the potential box office prospects of the Dungeons and Dragons movie. Today, let's talk about the potential box office prospects of the Dungeons and Dragons movie. Welcome back to those of you who've been here before. Welcome to those of you who are new to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the potential box office prospects of the Dungeons & Dragons movie. Now, I do want to say a couple things up front. Number one, I'm not going to throw out numbers because that's, the other people who know a lot more about this kind of stuff than I do are free to speculate. And even those people occasionally get it wrong. So this is more a matter of, succeed, fail, break even, that kind of thing. Not me sitting here saying, I think it's going to make $70 million its opening weekend. That's not what I'm shooting for here. Okay, so I've attempted to record this video like 3 times, and I keep making it shorter, so hopefully I've figured out how to get to the damn point here. So the big factors, as I see them, are number one, when it's being released. There is traditionally a dead zone between Christmas, New Year's, and like the start of May. So studios dump movies that they're not so sure about in this time frame, because if the movie's even moderately good, it'll take off because there's nothing else on. Now, there are some factors to consider here. Number one, the studios seem to be catching on to this fact. You would have thought they would have after Titanic, but apparently it took several more movies doing the same thing for them to figure this out. And number two, between streaming and there's probably still a reluctance due to COVID for some people to go to theaters, and some people just, during COVID figured out that, hey, this stuff's going to be on streaming in like 3 months. I can watch it at my house, or I can watch it in a theater with rude people who are on their damn cell phones the whole time and whatever else. So there's a percentage of people that are probably, for the most part, just checked out of the theater going experience. Not me. I love going to the theater. I love going to see movies at the theater. It's a whole deal, okay? I've gone to go watch movies that I didn't think would be great, but someone else was paying and it was in a theater, I was going. I don't know which ones are off the top of my head, but I know I have done that before. So that's factor number one. Now, as a consequence of this, and the other factors I mentioned, there are other movies that will be out that could potentially affect the box office of the Dungeons & Dragons movie. Like this last weekend, I'm recording this March 7th. So this last weekend, I haven't checked the numbers yet. So for all I know, this movie bombed, and this is totally flawed analysis. But I'm going to hope that it's not, so here goes. This last weekend, Creed 3 came out. And Ant-Man and the Wasp is still in theater, or Ant-Man and Quantumania, Ant-Man 3 is still in theaters. Haven't made it to see it yet. I'd like to, even though I've heard it's not so great. So you got those movies, but I think the movies that are really going to be an issue are Scream 6. Yes, I do think part 6 of a series can succeed. Because, number one, there's no other horror movies out right now. Number two, it's an established franchise. It's made it this far, and at least to me personally, I like the other five. They're not my favorite horror movies, but I do like them. In fact, they'd probably be better marketed as a thriller than a horror movie, because there's nothing really supernatural or anything going on. But that's a debate for another video. But more importantly, the trailer for this one definitely has a different feel, a different vibe completely than the others. It's in New York, which is radically different than the others. We've got characters from some of the past movies of showing up, at least one of which I was pretty sure was dead, but I guess she's not. And then, as near as we can tell, Sydney is not in this one. So, and then, like I said, the trailer gives off a different vibe, so people that think the franchise is on its last legs might look at it and be like, well, it looks different, let's give it a shot, you know. And I believe Jenna Ortega is in it, and so she might draw some people coming off of Wednesday, the show Wednesday, not the day, on Netflix. Wednesday Addams. She's part of the Addams family. Yes, that Addams family. So, you know, you've got some elements that can make it work. And then if it's any good, again, dead zone, so it'll take off. Plus, you know, horror movies tend to have lower budgets, so it doesn't take much for that movie to really be successful. But that's not what the analysis here is about. And so then, the other movie that I think is going to potentially cripple the D&D movie box office is John Wick 4. And that comes out the weekend before the D&D movie. And yeah, like that's a tough contender right there. Because the John Wick movies, I mean, they're on part 4 for a reason. So yeah, and it's now D&D does have the advantage of it's not rated R, so it's potentially family friendly, but I don't think that's the movie that's going to draw in families if I were a betting person. Just there's nothing in that movie that screams this is okay to take your kids to. But again, it's PG-13, so. But anyway. So you have that working for it, but if people are going just for the action, they're going to watch John Wick. They might just watch John Wick again instead of going to watch D&D, because they don't know what they're getting with D&D. They do know what they're getting with John Wick, and so that's another thing that I don't really know. It's hard to gauge. Where does the general public feel about Dungeons & Dragons? Is the general public like, oh yeah, that's that game the weirdos play? Are they, oh, that's that game the Satanists played back in the 80s? Are they, oh hey, that's the game the kids on Stranger Things play? You know, it could go a lot of ways. There's probably some people like, I'm not going to watch that, the last movie was terrible. Even though the two movies are totally unrelated. So to me, that's a toss-up as far as name and brand recognition. It could go either way. So, you know, I don't know. And then you've got star power. Well, I've seen some people, well, one person in particular, but he's a lunatic, who tried to suggest that, oh, well, look, all the movies that Michelle Rodriguez is in have made billions of dollars. Well, that's true, I believe. Yeah, that's probably true. But is Michelle Rodriguez the driver of the box office for any of those movies? No. She's second fiddle. You know, she's not a main character. And you know, you could argue that it hurts or helps that she's basically playing the same character she plays in several other movies. Her normal character is the vaguely tough, yet I'm pretty sure just about anyone with any kind of training and or size could easily handle her, has transformed into, no, she really is tough because she's the barbarian. And I'm sure that, at least looking at the trailer, they make her look a little bit bigger than I know she really is. So, so she's basically playing the same character. Quips, kind of looks tough. Only here she'll actually be fighting. And then you have Chris Pine. Now again, the argument was made, oh, Chris Pine, his movies have totaled over $1 billion. Probably. I'd have to actually double check that. But have they done that because Chris Pine was in them? No. Chris Pine was part of an ensemble cast for Star Trek, which is where the money comes from, probably. And on top of being an ensemble cast with several other, people whose at the time names were equally known as Chris Pine, because Chris Pine's not a huge star, okay? People know his name because of Star Trek. You look at the rest of the cast. You've got John Cho. He was known. I believe that's post Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. You've got Zoe Saldana, who had been in things before that. You've got Zachary Quinto. He wouldn't have been a huge name, but he had played the villain in Heroes, which got 3 seasons. So, again, not a huge name, but, not a complete unknown. You've got Simon Pegg as Scotty. People definitely knew him. In fact, there's a real high chance he was the most well-known person in the cast as far as the new crew. I can't think of Chekhov's name off the top of my head. I feel bad about that because he's unfortunately passed away. But yeah, so you've got, most of the cast. Oh, and Carl Urban as Bones. And he had definitely been in things by that point. So you can't point to any one particular member of the cast and say, aha, that was the magic bullet. It's an ensemble, and it's a remake. So, no, the Chris Pine $1 billion movie thing, no. These two are not like, say, Tom Cruise. We can be fairly certain that Tom Cruise's presence in a movie drives ticket sales. Okay, we've got a long track record of him being the leading man in movies. In fact, he's probably one of the last real stars in Hollywood. Whatever you may think of his, any personal things about him, he does have star power. Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford is Han Solo. He made those parts and definitely helped carry. He totally carried the Indiana Jones movies and helped the Star Wars movies tremendously. Now again, Star Wars is more of an ensemble cast, but between him, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher, let's be real here, it's Harrison Ford. His is the one whose career survived the Star Wars movies. So, you got people like that. You've got, in the current day, you've got, Chris Pratt. You can probably objectively say that he has carried some movies, like the Lego movie. I know it's only voice work, but, it is what it is. Everyone knew who it was. He had his character from Parks and Recreations. I don't know. I really should watch that show at some point. But he also had Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy. Now again, it's an ensemble, but he is clearly the lead in the ensemble. Did the movie make the money it did because of him? Probably not. He was a contributing factor, but the fact that it was an MCU movie probably drove the massive ticket sales. Now, the sequel, that was going into, okay, we know what we're getting into, we like the characters, give us more. So the sequel is definitely carried on the weight of the previous movie, the writing, the cast, and everything. And again, with him playing a larger role as the lead, you know, you could attribute a percentage of the success to him for sure. But yeah, that's what you get with more, you know, modern movies. There's a lot of ensemble stuff going on, a lot of co-leads and things like that. And it's really difficult to kind of pin down who's driving the box office. And so to say that Chris Pine or Michelle Rodriguez drove the box office for the movies they're in is kind of laughable. So I don't buy that for a moment. I don't know, like, Chris Pine has been the lead, so I know he can be a lead. But this is an ensemble group. And you've got Hugh Grant as your villain, a villain. I think there's a couple villains in the movie. So, in Hugh Grant, you know, he's a known factor. I'm sure there are some people that will go watch the movie because Hugh Grant's in it. However, Hugh Grant is also in some other movie. I had a list of movies in the previous iterations of this video, but I realized half the videos are just me talking about the other movies that are going to be out before this movie. But I know Hugh Grant's in one of them, so might be fighting himself at the box office. 65 Million is another movie that is coming out prior to the D&D movie that'll probably still be in theaters. And I'm not so sure on that one, but you know, maybe it's just not my cup of tea. I guess we'll find out if Adam Driver can be the lead or not. So, you know, you got these things going against you. You know, you got these things not necessarily going against you. So you have that versus Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves is very clearly a leading man. Keanu Reeves is definitely one of the major forces that made the Matrix movie successful. He's the entire force that's made the John Wick movie successful. I mean, the secondary characters all definitely helped. You know, there's some real good casting there, but this is a Keanu Reeves movie. Okay, there's no doubt about that. So, definite billion-dollar star, multi-billion-dollar star probably, lead versus not so much. You know, so on that front, I think the D&D movie is not in a good position. But the question is it counterbalanced by the fact it's PG-13 versus R? They're not coming out the same weekend, so they're not a head-to-head competition. It's more a matter of, will people still be going to watch John Wick when D&D comes out instead of going to watch D&D? Or the other movies, you know, Scream 6, 65 Million, maybe Creed 3. I know there's another movie coming out somewhere in there, and I just cannot remember what it is. Doesn't really matter. It's whichever one Hugh Grant's in. So you got these things potentially working against it, because I feel like there's similar audiences for some of this stuff. Not all of it. Like Creed 3, for instance, that's probably a different audience. John Wick, that might be a lot of the same audience. 65 Million, that might be a lot of the same audience. You know, the effects spectacular types. So, and you also don't know if a counter-programming movie is able to make the move instead. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say John Wick's coming out, okay? So you're a studio and you're sitting there like, well, I'm not going to release my action movie that week because I don't want to fight John Wick. I'll release my romance movie, my relationship movie, my whatever tragedy Nicholas Sparks wrote about recently movie, you know. And it's counter-programming. It's providing the audience that doesn't want to see John Wick with something else. And it does occasionally work. Because, I mean, usually whatever you're counter-programming against is still the juggernaut. But you can easily be second. And usually you're a much lower budget movie anyway. So there could be a counter-programming movie out there that manages to wreck some of these expectations. And so you have these things you have to consider, because a major factor here is This movie will not rise and fall based on D&D fans going to watch it. The budget is too big for that. And it's only going to succeed if a bunch of the normies go watch it. If the normies are watching other things, they won't be watching D&D. So that's a major factor on whether or not the movie will succeed. Another is the movie any good? Which we won't know until we actually see it. But I have my reservations based on the trailers. Now, from our past video on this topic, if you've seen it here on our channel, you know that I'm probably alone in this reservation, and that's fine, in that comedies, generally speaking, and this is the way this is being sold so far, in my opinion, there's a lot of laughs in that trailer, and there's a whole lot of there's a couple like, this appears to be a serious moment, let's undercut it with a joke. And that's not working out for the MCU here lately, because they've gone too far down the joke path. And I think part of that is because they saw the success of Guardians of the Galaxy, and they overlooked that there's actually a lot of really serious moments in the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. They deal with a whole lot of like really tough interpersonal things, and things like, you know, dealing with, you know, with your parents, and, you know, trying to make a relationship work, and you know, what's the difference between a father and a dad? You know, there's a lot more going on there than just a bunch of jokes in space. And you can see this more in some of James Gunn's other work, like if you see the second Suicide Squad movie, and I was watching it last night, and there's a couple conversations where like Ratcatcher 2, you know, is talking about her dad, you know, and on the one hand, like, yeah, he's a drug addict, but on the other hand, she's, you know, absolutely convinced that he loved her and everything. Meanwhile, I don't know if it's Bloodshot or Bloodsport, his dad was clearly a monster. And old John Cena's character, he doesn't say anything, but he's definitely kind of nodding along, and if you see his show on HBO Max, you see just what kind of monster his dad is. And I mean, there's still plenty of jokes, but there's a whole lot of reason for us to care about the characters. And everything isn't undercut by a joke. Some moments are actually allowed to just be. And so I think James Gunn has a better grasp on these things than some of the other folks trying them in the MCU. And so I don't know if the people making this movie are on that level or not. If they're not, it's going to misfire. Like, guarantee the jokes are going to misfire, because you're running into a potential trap in that the temptation is to make a lot of them in-jokes about Dungeons & Dragons. The problem is, most of the audience won't get it. Part of the D&D fans won't get it, because these in-jokes they think everyone that plays D&D knows. I'll give you guys a little secret here. Not everyone that plays D&D knows those jokes. None of the normies know them. Like, it's a dumb idea from top to bottom, but I see people online constantly are like, oh, we should do this and this. And it's like, no, you shouldn't. You really shouldn't. You make a handful of inside jokes, sure, you know, why not? But you cannot base the movie around that. And I don't think this one is, by the way. But, you know, you've got potential problems that you've got to watch out for with stuff like that. Now, the other problem is comedy just in general is hard, okay? Action's easy. Have an explosion, throw some guys through the air, have some gunshots going, a couple people have some squibs go off. Action, it's easy. You know, you got choreography, but it just has to look pretty. Humor's, it's about timing, it's about the joke, it's about being in the right time and place for that joke. There's so much to it. I don't envy people who try to be comedians at all. Like, you know, I fancy myself to be able to occasionally make a joke at the appropriate time in the appropriate way. That's about the extent of my comedic ability. I'm sure some of you are out there like, what the hell is he talking about? He sucks. His jokes all fall flat. And maybe they do. That's my point. Maybe with you they do. comedy is hard. So, setting yourself up as a comedy, not good if you don't have to. Also, most comedies tend to have low budgets. This movie does not have a low budget, because most comedies don't make tons of money. You know, it's like horror. You know, you can make them cheap, so, you know, you get enough butts in the seats, you make all your money back pretty easily. It's not a big spectacular. It's not a big spectacle. By the way, total like off topic, but comedy and horror are very closely related genres as far as how they're set up. Literally, it's the setup, the build-up. Both have that. It's just a matter of the payoff. You know, with a joke, it's a laugh. With horror, it's usually someone being horribly murdered. But they're very similar structures as far as their approach to things. Probably why jokes slip in really easily in horror movies, and also why horror movies always run the risk of just becoming a joke. So anyway, it can work. You know, you look at things like Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest is hilarious. Taking a genre that, you know, sci-fi, that doesn't normally have a ton of comedy, and making it work. It can work. And so fantasy, not normally known for its comedic traits, it can work. I think, however, in my opinion, that's not the greatest comparison, because Galaxy Quest, by the time it came out, it's clearly an homage to Star Trek, okay? Star Wars, I guess, but primarily Star Trek. There had been at least 3 TV shows, one of which is considered iconic, even though it only had 2.5 seasons. Everyone knows who Spock and Kirk are. You had The Next Generation already. You had, I think, all of Deep Space Nine had run its course. I want to say Voyager and possibly Enterprise were on at that point. You had at least the main 6 movies with the original cast, and I think Generations had already come out. So you had quite a huge body of work that everyone knew what you were poking fun at. But the way it's structured, yeah, they're making fun of it, but they're not just laughing at it, they're laughing with it. Because there are parts that are absurd. Everyone knows they're absurd. You know, but they make good television, so that's why they're there. So, you know, it wasn't just mockery, you know, we were all laughing together. And the problem is, Dungeons & Dragons doesn't have that. Dungeons & Dragons has a few fantasy films and books that helped build what Dungeons & Dragons is based on, but you don't. But Dungeons & Dragons, it's like you've got this huge body of work, you know, Lord of the Rings, Conan, all that kind of stuff. Then it's filtered into Dungeons & Dragons, where it's changed. You can see where things come from, but there's a lot of unique stuff in there too, and everything's, you know, kind of twisted and shaped a little bit. And then the movie is looking at that. The movie's not looking at all this stuff that built Dungeons & Dragons. It's looking at Dungeons & Dragons. So the jokes are going to be derived from Dungeons & Dragons, not all of this. Plus, people aren't necessarily going to expect all this, because it's being filtered. Okay? So jokes about this are less likely to connect, because it's about this. Not the stuff that made this, but this. And so, that's a problem. You know, Star Trek, it was about all this. You know, for Galaxy Quest, 'cause it's talking about Star Trek, which was all this. Galaxy Quest wasn't mocking some show that itself was based on Star Trek. It'd be like if Galaxy Quest had been poking fun at the Orville. Okay, the Orville is derived from Star Trek, but it's not Star Trek. And so it doesn't work the same. Okay, plus the Orville's already full of jokes, from what I've seen. So I need to watch the rest of it, because I hear it's better Trek than current Trek. So that's a potential problem. Depending on how they handle it, we don't know until we see the movie. But the jokes could fall flat. The jokes could be about things that no one in the audience knows a damn thing about. and there could just be too many jokes. Or, on the flip side, the trailers are presenting us with a comedy and it won't be very funny. Like, that's all the jokes. And there will be people who go watch it based on the trailer and they will think they've been lied to and deceived. They will complain. Those complaints will catch on. So they're walking a tightrope, okay? I don't know that there is a good answer there. Obviously, there should be jokes, okay? It shouldn't be... We should take the movie approximately as seriously as the characters take the events of the movie. If the characters don't take it seriously, the audience won't take it seriously. The audience doesn't take it seriously, they don't buy into it. Fantasy requires a lot of buy-in, just like science fiction, because it's not reality. And otherwise, the whole thing just becomes absurd. The whole thing becomes a joke, and not the kind you want to be. So that's you know, it just that's how the movie is what's going to affect that. And then there's one final thing that I have to add that it wasn't in the other versions of these videos. Apparently an article came out where people that worked on the movie said that they intentionally emasculated most of the male characters, or at the very least Chris Pine. This was the kind of article that gets around, and yeah, let's just say that in my opinion, let's assume that a broad number of people actually read this article or hear about it. I don't know if that's going to happen, but for argument's sake, let's say we do. You're going to lose more people than you're going to gain from that. The people that want to see that, first of all, they don't spend money on things, okay? Whoever thinks pursuing those people is a winning strategy is a fool. They don't spend money. They're anti-capitalism, okay? Don't listen to them. But the other people who are kind of on the border are thinking, oh no, this is another movie with an agenda. Doesn't matter what the agenda is, people are rejecting these kinds of things, okay? You've begun to see it. I mean, Top Gun did huge money last year, all on the premise of there's no agenda. It's just a movie about fighter jets. It's a sequel to a movie from 40 years ago with the same guy. Same two guys. Like, that's it. That was the premise of the movie. The plot wasn't really all that strong. It wasn't that particularly well written. Hell, I don't even know what country they attacked in the movie. I'm pretty sure they never actually even said what the country was. And so, you know, but based purely on that, it made all kinds of money. Because there's a very large group of people growing ever larger that are just getting really tired of being lectured to by their entertainment. So whenever they hear something like that, there's people that are going to be like, I'm checking out. I'm done. I'm not going to watch it. So that's bad. And then you have the people that are potentially going to boycott because of the OGL thing, but I don't think that's going to matter, okay? Number one, it's not everyone affected by it. Number two, even if it was, it's not a tremendous number of people. So, you know, I'm not saying don't boycott if you're going to do that, but just realize that you will not be what makes or breaks the movie. Sorry to tell you. Sorry to interrupt the video here, folks. I realized after I recorded this and was editing it that I left out a very important piece of the puzzle of the box office potential for the D&D movie. I talked at considerable length, hopefully not quite as much in the final product as I did in the previous iterations of this, about the movies that are coming out before the D&D movie that could still be rolling through the box office and eating up part of its box office. However, usually movies that come out afterwards are more important, and I forgot to even mention that. And so the weekend after the D&D movie comes out, I believe it's the weekend after, is when the Super Mario Brothers movie comes out. And I personally haven't watched any of the trailers for it, so I don't know where to judge that on the potential here. But there's probably a potentially huge overlap in the audience. Mario has, like, without a doubt, is a far more well-known property. Like, that's a fact. Okay, it's not even close. It eclipses D&D by a wide margin. So, along with that, Chris Pratt is Mario. So, again, the star power I was talking about is hitting the D&D movie on both sides. Keanu Reeves before, Chris Pratt after. So, if that movie is even remotely good, I've got the feeling that that's going to cripple the hopes of the D&D movie. So, depending on where I edit this into the other video, I'm probably going to shift my my prediction to moderate success at the high end. So, because I think the Mario movie could really do a number on it. So, I mean, we'll have to see. You know, it's we're talking the quality of the movies. You know, if John Wick 4 is any good, it'll still have carryover to the weekend D&D comes out. If D&D is any good, it'll potentially have people come in the second weekend that didn't go watch it the first weekend. And if Mario's any good, it'll start drawing in the same people that would be going to the D&D movie. So it'll kill the return trips to the D&D movie. And any movie that makes any real money, it's because people keep going back. So we'll see. You know, still up in the air, but to my mind, now that I've looked a little bit ahead and I've seen that, my prediction is it's moderate success at best and probably closer to middling. So, but that's just me. I mean, I've said that it's probably going to go on to make $1 billion now. So we'll see what happens. Now return you to your regularly scheduled video. So, yeah, that's my analysis. At the moment, I think it will literally depend entirely on if the movie's any good. I think all the other factors are going to balance out, and that's what it's going to come down to. I don't think an ad campaign is going to matter. The stars that are in it don't matter. I think it's all canceled out by other factors. So I think it will literally just come down to, is this movie any good or not? Which is what should determine box office, but it really doesn't. So we'll see in this case. But anyway, thanks for listening to me ramble. Check us out on Twitter, and a little thing should be down here right about now. Let me know what you guys think, whether you think it's going to succeed or fail. Are you going to watch it or not? Why or why not? Like, subscribe, all that other fun stuff. You know, it's YouTube. But anyway, folks, talk to you later.